Good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to have just tabled our 2022 Ontario Economic Outlook and Fiscal Review. As I mentioned in the legislature, Ontario, like the rest of the world, will continue to face economic challenges in the months ahead. Our 2022 Fall Economic Statement highlights our first ever progress report, the significant progress we have made on our plan to build. We are also advancing our plan with new targeted measures to rebuild the economy, address labor shortages in this province, and keep costs down for families, businesses, and workers. L'énoncé économique de l'automne 2022 met en évidence, dans notre tout premier rapport d'étape, les progrès remarquables que nous avons réalisés dans l'exécution de notre plan pour bâtir. Nous présentons aussi notre plan pour mettre en œuvre de nouvelles mesures ciblées dans le but de reconstruire l'économie, combler les actuelles pénuries de main-d'œuvre dans la province et garder les coûts bas pour les familles, les travailleurs, les travailleuses et les entreprises. Our government has made progress, significant progress, to attract investments and good jobs, tens of thousands of skilled trade workers. We've attracted infrastructure and built infrastructure and put money back in people's pockets. To advance our plan, we are keeping costs down. We are going to continue to extend the cut to the gas and fuel tax to December 31st, 2023. This would mean households of this province would save $195 on average between July 1st, 2022 and December 31st, 2023. We are also supporting low-income seniors by proposing to double payments for all senior recipients of the Ontario Guaranteed Annual Income System program for 2023. To help address the labor shortage, we are investing an additional $40 million for the latest round of the Skills Development Fund. We are also proposing to increase the amount a person on the Ontario Disability Support Program, also known as ODSP, that they can earn from $200 to $1,000 per month without impacting their income support. This measure would encourage people with a disability who want to increase their work hours to do so and promote more participation in the workforce while not penalizing them for doing so. Our government is also expanding the dual credit program. This gives students the opportunity to complete credits towards both an Ontario secondary school diploma and college credential or certificate of apprentices. With the economic challenges Ontario and the rest of the world are facing, our government has a responsible, prudent plan that will help us navigate these uncertain times and build a stronger Ontario. Now, I'd like to be happy and be pleased to take any questions you may have.
Can you tell us at a time of unprecedented health care crisis why there's not a single cent in new health care spending in this document?
Well, there is a significant amount of health care spending that I put in the budget. So we got to work early. As you know, we inherited an infrastructure system and a health care system that wasn't prepared for the environment that we faced in the pandemic. That's why we got to work really early on building the health care system. And in the last budget that passed in August, I put another $5.6 billion into healthcare. That's on top of the over $5 billion the previous year. We're pouring significant funds in place and have been for some time. This is going to support home and community care, acute care, long-term care. It addresses the labor shortage, putting more money in for hiring staffing and personal support workers and nurses, making the personal support worker pay increase permanent, funding for the surgical backlog, funding for new ways to attract and retain healthcare workers in this province. You have to also understand, apart from putting in historic and unprecedented amounts of money into our healthcare system, we're not the only jurisdiction facing the challenges of COVID and the flu season and SRV. So we've made through our plan to stay open, through Bill 7, our plan to stay open 2.0, we've been making investments in healthcare.
Monsieur le ministre, on a un déficit beaucoup moins grand que ce à quoi on s'attendait, mais on n'a pas autant de nouveaux investissements ou de nouveaux programmes qu'annoncé dans le dernier budget. Est-ce que la province s'attend à une récession?
Écoutez, c'est une très bonne question. Actuellement, nous avons un plan pour bâtir l'Ontario. On a pris des programmes ciblés pour soutenir beaucoup de travailleurs, des familles travailleuses en Ontario. Et nous continuerons avec ce plan pour bâtir l'Ontario. En même temps, d'assurer qu'on peut faire des investissements contre l'économie incertaine et on continue avec ce plan.
Pourquoi vous n'utilisez pas le terme récession? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui ne vous inquiète pas vraiment? Vous parlez d'économie incertaine, mais jamais le mot récession.
Toujours j'inquiète avec des choses dehors. On a un monde complexe actuellement, la guerre avec la Russie et des autres choses économiques, les taux d'intérêt qui sont durs actuellement. Alors, toujours, on voit la situation économique. Et avec ce plan, avec notre position financière, on peut agir dans quelques scénarios.
Minister, the $2 billion surplus that's now gone, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was spent entirely on debt reduction. Do you think that was the best way to spend $2 billion? Are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely. We have to do both. We have to invest in the future of the province. So we're making historic and unprecedented investments in healthcare, as I just outlined, healthcare, in education and social services. There's many things in this plan to make sure that the infrastructure is there, not just for today, but for tomorrow. And at the same time, be very prudent fiscally. And that's why, as a fiscally responsible steward of the taxpayers' money, we were able to continue our investments, our historic investments in building this province, while at the same time, due to the one-time and the windfall of revenues last fiscal year, to put that against the accumulated deficit.
Minister, why is there such a big discrepancy between the FAO's projection of the deficit and yours?
Well, you'd have to ask the FAO. I mean, the FAO forecasts are based on a point in time, and of course our forecasts are based on, and a month or two ago, our forecasts are based on the private sector, and the FAO's forecasts are more let's say optimistic than our forecasts, and he said at the time in his press conference that we're in a period of economic stability. I would respectfully think that many Ontarians would disagree with that statement, that we're in a time of fiscal stability. And let me tell you this, when I get up here, the Auditor General looks at our numbers. And the Auditor General for the last 5 years has provided a clean bill of health to Ontario's books. That wasn't the case often with the previous government that got qualified opinions. There's also the pre-election review. When I tabled the budget, the Auditor General looked at our numbers and said that it's a fully costed program, it's responsible, and it ties together. The previous government, I'll remind you, in 2018 didn't get that clean bill of health from the Auditor General. And the final thing I would say is I'm out here every 90 days, regardless of the situation, to tell the people of Ontario how we're spending their money and how we continue to invest dear taxpayer dollars on behalf of all Ontarians.
Why is it then that every time you put out a projected deficit, when the actual numbers come in, it's nowhere near as bad as you say?
Well, you have to look at the economic environment that we're in. The FAO says we're in an economically stable environment. I don't know. You look at the last couple of years, private forecasters felt that the economy would come out slower out of the pandemic and inflation would be lower, and it was higher. And this fiscal year, just the opposite is happening. Inflation is coming down and the economic forecasts have come down. So what's important from a finance minister's point of view is that we have a transparent plan for the people of Ontario, that I'm up here every 90 days, and I'm very confident in that plan that takes into account the historic investments that we're making in our infrastructure, our critical healthcare and education systems, and at the same time is transparent with the people how we're navigating through these uncertain economic times.
Minister, you don't have anything beyond in the books beyond 24, 25. Are you going to balance the books before the 2026 election? Because it certainly seems like there's a lot of scenarios where you could have a huge surplus. You could have a $9.2 billion surplus in 24, 25, according to your best case scenario. Is it possible that you're going to balance the books even in the worst case scenario before the next election?
So what's clear is that we've put 3 scenarios in the statement today. There's a practice that we started in 2020 because, Rob, I don't know how your crystal ball is, but I'd love to know what the situation is going to be in 2026. What we have to say is this is what could happen to revenues. This is how our expenditures are looking. Of course, I'm an optimist, and I'm confident in the people of Ontario. I'm confident in our resourcefulness to deal with the challenges as we faced the pandemic. I'm encouraged by little signs like last month, 47,000 new employees added to the province. But we're not immune. We're not an island here. We're connected to the global economy. And so what I can assure you with full predictive capability is that we'll be out every 90 days updating the people of Ontario.
Mister, could you explain these energy credits? I don't understand it at all. Why, if I come to Ontario and I use our clean grid, clean for now anyway, until we start burning more natural gas, why would I buy this credit? It sounds, what would I use it for?
So this clean energy credit system that we're incorporating will really allow companies who are using clean energy. By the way, Ontario produces 94% of our electricity emission, as you know, is low carbon emissions. So we have a good track record here in Ontario. We got to get to 100,000. That's why we're 100% of clean energy on our electricity grid. It's a number of companies that come to us that want to invest in Ontario say, I want to get credit for using clean energy. And so this will be a registry that allows them to produce their stats for clean energy and green energy, and will give transparency so they can report to investors how they're conducting their operations.
So I don't understand what they're going to pay for this to be on a list that says they're in Ontario. I mean, I can't understand what this thing is.
So this will allow them to disclose their amount of energy they're using and which components are clean and green, which allows them to give transparency to the marketplace. They will have an opportunity to tell their investors what they're doing, and they will have an opportunity to sell those credits if they so choose. But to the administrative side of the program, I would refer you to our great Minister of Energy, Todd Smith.
So like cap and trade, are you going back to cap and trade?
No, we're not going back to cap and trade. But what we are doing, because we have such a green footprint in electricity production, is to make it transparent and put it out in a registry. And at the same time, I want to also let people know that Ontario leads the country in the issuance of green bonds. We have a great footprint in this province, built up over a long period of time to support a green economy, including taking cars off the road by building public transit, by having a nuclear footprint, by having infrastructure in place, projects that are green. And every time we do that, we can issue bonds. And we're setting records in Ontario on behalf of Canadians in issuing green bonds because those projects exist here in Ontario and that we can fund.
There's been no change in the investments that are being made in the environmental space in Ontario between this FES and the last FES, beyond some power things. And I'm wondering if you're putting any additional financial weight behind addressing the climate emergency in this province.
Well, yes, we're doing a significant amount, and I would argue that there are a number of initiatives. Let me start with the investment that we made along with the federal government in the Dofasco steel manufacturing plant in Hamilton, which we're converting to a electricity arc furnace, which will take coal production of steel and make it this clean green energy from electricity. Shovels in the ground started in October, so we're getting that done, and that's the equivalent of taking 1 million cars off the road each year. We also made the announcement of the small modular reactor in Darlington, which is the equivalent of 300,000 homes lighted up with clean energy. And we've recently announced that we're looking into, through the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, the opportunity to refurbish Pickering Nuclear Station, which is in my riding, which represents 14% of all of Ontario's electricity. And I'll note that Mark Carney, who's doing a lot of work on the green side, said there's no path to net zero without nuclear. And Ontario was very fortunate to have world-class assets in this province, but also has world-class engineers and boilermakers and people who are expert in refurbishing. So we're doing a lot of things, and clearly we're going to continue to do more.
Minister, why is the main affordability measure then a continuation of the reduction in the gas tax? That's not going to take cars off the road.
No, but while we're becoming a manufacturing powerhouse in electric vehicle, our intentions are clear. We want to be the center of North America for electric vehicle production, and we're getting the investments. I noted in my remarks $12.5 billion of investments into electric vehicle production and battery production already in this province. You also have to recognize that many people right now need to drive to get to work, to take their kids to school across this whole province. And now is not the time to increase those taxes at this time.
Why are housing start projections going down? And what will that impact have on the goal to build 1.5 million homes?
I've been around for quite some time. Markets go up, markets go down, economies go through cycles. And right now, because of the inflation that we're seeing, the highest levels in 40 years, central banks around the world are increasing interest rates. So I think the higher interest rates are having some impact, which is why we need to continue our plan to find ways to get those homes built, not just in the next year, but over the next 10 years. I'm the son of Hungarian refugees, and I remember meeting 3 of my great-grandparents. So they escaped during World War II. And my mother and her brother and my grandparents all living under one roof. And this is a beacon for all of the world to come to Canada. But we got to make sure that they have the opportunity to live in a home, a roof over their head, to make sure that they have the opportunity for a job, have the opportunity to have the infrastructure in place to welcome them to this country. And that's why in the short run, we're seeing some housing starts drop off, but they'll come back, and we'll make sure, as we've tabled in the plan, that we're working hard each and every day to make that happen.
So you said the road ahead this fiscal year is going to be tough. Beyond this big contingency fund, what is the government doing to prepare for a recession?
Well, a number of things that we're doing, including continuing building infrastructure. These building roads and highways and public transit and housing and hospitals and long-term care facilities, these are all things that are productive, what we call productive assets. They won't just be here for 1 year. They'll be here for decades and decades and will help our productivity. And so I think that our plan to build is the right plan at the right time, especially when our population's increasing. I mean, of the 500,000 people that come targeted for 2025 come into Canada, as you've heard the Premier say, up to 300,000 people will call Ontario their home. So we've got a plan, not thinking just for today, but for tomorrow. And as well, we have we've laid out a plan, the various scenarios that we show that we can fund. It results in different outcomes, but that we've been pretty transparent about how we would navigate those uneconomic times.
Someone struggling going to the grocery store, struggling to pay for the groceries. What was in today's document to help them with that?
Well, I'm glad you've asked that question because, you threw that in at the last. I'm glad you asked that though because we recalled the legislature, Richard, as you know, in the summer, to pass some of the measures, including the low-income individual family tax credit. That means low-income workers will get up to $875 back in tax rebates. That's not insignificant in dollars. Today we announced a measure that I'm very proud of the Ontario Disability Support Program to allow many who are able to work that now the earnings exemption's gone from $200 to $1,000 per month so that they can keep more money in their pocket. We also are...
It's a fraction of the... Sorry, I have to interrupt here. That's 25,000 people. There are 500,000 on ODSP.
And Cynthia, and that's why you know that we also announced the indexation. No government's ever done that in Ontario, to index it to inflation, a significant measure. You've
But why
seen
not
the
start that
costing.
now instead of next year, because they're struggling now.
Well, we increased it by 5% now, and we're tying it, indexing it to inflation, which I would, and you've seen the numbers in the financial economic statement, the cost of that, a significant contribution for the many who cannot work, they will get in their pockets as a result of that measure. I would also add the guaranteed annual income supplement. That's going to help 200,000 low-income seniors get up to $1,000 more in their pockets through these challenging times, because we have to recognize that inflation is very hurtful to many on fixed incomes and on lower incomes.
This will be the last question.
Why not increase the 5%? Like, even with the tax breaks, even with the inflation adjustments, it's still not enough for a lot of people to live on. Could you live on that amount of money plus the tax incentives that you're offering?
So we've taken a number of measures going back to March, where we had made the first move to take off license plate stickers. That's $120 per car for the 8 million people who drive in this province. We took the tolls off the 412 and the 418. We increased the minimum wage. As I just said, in fact, that minimum wage now is the second highest of any province in the country. We increased the amount of rebate for low individual and families, lower income workers, to have the lowest tax rates for people making up to $50,000 in the country. And I announced today, obviously, a number of measures, including the gains and the ODSP earnings exemption. We we called the legislature back so we could enact some of those measures. So we've taken a number of measures. We'll continue to work with all Ontarians and all stakeholders to deliver what we can in the environment that we're in.
Steadfast in not wanting to raise these rates?
We have, with respect, we have raised the rates. We've taken action to index it we've taken action to increase the rates by 5%. We indexed it to inflation. We announced additional measures for them today, which I'm very proud of, and we'll continue to do so because we're here to support all Ontarians. Thank you very much.